Well, let's get reaction to that report's findings. General David Petraeus, the former commander of the ISAF, the International Military Mission in Afghanistan, and former director of the CIA, joins us now from Arlington in Virginia. General Petraeus, good to see you this afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on Sky News.
Good to be with you, Sarah Jane. Thank you.
You'll have had a chance to have a look at the findings of this report published here in the UK about the UK's withdrawal from Afghanistan, summed up as a disaster and a betrayal. From what you witnessed unfold with that withdrawal from Afghanistan, is that something you would agree with?
Sadly, I think I would. I've described the withdrawal from Afghanistan as heartbreaking, tragic, and disastrous. And I think this report captures that, obviously, from a British perspective and with respect to what Britain was doing as part of an overall policy that really was largely determined, obviously, by a U.S. decision and determination to withdraw by two consecutive administrations in Washington. I found the report really quite, in a way, characteristically British, though. It's forthright, it's factual, it is unsparing. And, you know, kudos to Tom Tugendhat, who I know, and to the team. And of course, it's known that I was one of the witnesses for this effort.
If you were to apply those same principles to the US's withdrawal from Afghanistan and be forthright about that, what would your personal findings be about the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan at that time?
Well, again, the bottom line is that the ultimate effect, I think, was disastrous. It condemned a country of some 40 million citizens whom we sought to help for 20 years at considerable sacrifice, both on the part of coalition members and also Afghans. In fact, mostly Afghans. Keep in mind that these accusations that the Afghans wouldn't fight were just unfounded. There 26 or 27 times as many Afghan soldiers were killed as were American soldiers, for example. I said when the decision was announced that I feared that we would come to regret this decision, and I think that we have. The decision and also the way the withdrawal was conducted also allowed potential adversaries to say that the U.S. is not a dependable partner and a great power in decline. Now, I don't believe in either of those. And I believe that the U.S. and UK, and by the way, the UK has been walking point in many respects in the response to the Russian unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. But I believe that we are showing together now, together with the rest of NATO and the rest of the Western world, that, again, certainly the U.S. can and does lead the world when the interests are seen. And I am hugely disappointed that we didn't see that our interests should have led us to maintain a very modest force, noting that the UK and just about all of the other coalition members wanted to stay. And of course, were unable to influence Washington to do that.
The decision was made, and you feel it was the wrong one. However, there was a lot of time for nations to be prepared to evacuate from Afghanistan, the UK, of course, being a big part of that. And I just want to pick up on some of the key points in this report, key failures, they've called them. And one is about leadership, something you know a thing or two about, it has to be said. A top civil servant in the Foreign Office, Sir Philip Barton, was on holiday at the time, as was the UK Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister. None of them cut their leave short as Kabul fell. Now, the report said this marks a fundamental lack of seriousness, grip, or leadership at a time of national emergency. Are you shocked by the actions of our leaders at a time when Afghanistan, a country that the UK and Western allies have been invested in for so long, didn't take the kind of urgent action that now they are probably regretting?
Well, I'm sure that they are, and I'm sure that they obviously misjudged what was going to play out. That should not have been actually a surprise. I and a number of others, a month or more before the withdrawal, said that I fear that there could be a psychological collapse of the Afghan security forces. Indeed, there's a special Inspector General report out just in the United States, which notes that two administrations in the U.S. completely underestimated what the effect was of the decision to withdraw when it was announced on the Afghans, both Afghan military and police and Afghans in government as well. There was just a complete lack of appreciation for what the impact of that was on those who we were depending to continue to fight. And noting that, of course, one of the really overlooked elements of this was not just that we withdrew 3,500 US forces, or less actually, 8,500 coalition forces. We also withdrew over 15,000 contractors, Western contractors, who were needed desperately to maintain the most important element in the Afghan military, which was the air component, particularly the helicopters that are relied upon to bring the reinforcements out to any one of the Afghan elements around the country who are under attack. And these are quite good forces, about 3,500 commandos that comprise that reserve. And the key was the US Black Hawk helicopters that would ferry them out there and also provide emergency resupply, air medevac, and also then there was close air support as another element of that.
Yeah, General Petraeus, actually, I'm quite pleased that you've put that context to the situation there, because one of the excuses we kept hearing after the fall of Kabul is that the speed of the takeover of the Taliban couldn't have been anticipated. It took everyone by surprise. Do you buy that as an excuse?
It could have been. No, I think it could have been and should have been. Again, as I said, I did state publicly, and I'm a bit cautious with my words, and was all along. And again, by the way, I don't do domestic politics, so don't ask me what should happen to the individuals in the Foreign Office or something like that. I don't do that here either. But in terms of this policy, I think there was a complete lack of appreciation for the effect on all of these entities in Afghanistan. Frankly, we now know that the Taliban, once they knew that we were leaving, started to negotiate with those on the front lines. And once the front lines realized nobody's coming to the rescue, why should they continue to fight? Afghans are survivors. They have seen different countries' forces wash across them numerous times, of course, British forces among them on many quite famous occasions. And in this case, we just completely missed that. The other big error here was conducting a withdrawal at the height of the fighting season. So the conditions could not have been more propitious for the Taliban and the Haqqani network and the other elements of their particular opposition force to make the attacks and to then march to Kabul. So again, there were just enormous misjudgments and miscalculations, and again, failure to appreciate the timing of this. Why not do it in the middle of winter when at least it's snowing and it's hard to get to Kabul, and you might have some chance. By the way, there are a number of failings on the Afghan side as well. The Special Inspector General report for Afghanistan notes, as an example, that the then President Ashraf Ghani fired all of his senior military in the final weeks and replaced them with older ones that he felt in whom he had more confidence, but basically from the communist era. That's an enormous blow to morale in the ranks. If you see all those who have earned their way into these positions over many years of very tough fighting, all of a sudden swept aside because the president doesn't have confidence in them. And also a failure to craft a true defensive concept for the country, which should have acknowledged that, okay, we can't defend everything, but by golly, we can defend these, and these will be our priority, and this is how we're going to do this. And if necessary, the kind of Zelensky leadership that has been positively Churchillian in the case of Ukraine was completely lacking, obviously, in Kabul, where all of the intrigue and scheming and all the rest of that had been debilitating for many years, but was particularly so in this particular situation.
General Petraeus, I'm conscious we have limited time with you, and there is so much to talk about when it comes to Afghanistan. We can't possibly cover it all, but I do want to talk to you about duty of care. Another key failure found in this report was that Afghan allies, Afghan nationals that helped the West during the war were let down. There was a shocking absence of a plan to help them. I mean, you'll have worked with many of them. You'll have looked in their eyes when you work with them. And, I know many promises were made to look after them because they helped the West. And sadly, for so many, we talk about the Afghans being survivors. Many of them, sadly, haven't survived because they were left behind by the West. I just wanted to get your reflection on that.
Well, what you're describing is a moral obligation, and we have not met that moral obligation, certainly in the United States, nor in a number of other countries that had forces there. In the U.S., we have something called the Special Immigrant Visa, which is extended to Afghans who served 2 or more years. Now it's actually been shortened to a year, I believe, by a recent change in the law. But again, in other words, they served on the front lines as battlefield interpreters, sharing risk and hardship with our soldiers. In many cases, they did many years on the ground alongside our small units, platoons. Our son was a platoon leader there, had his terp with him during that period of time. And that terp had already served with several other units prior to that and served with others after that. They were an enormous hardship and risk and so forth. And we left. The State Department believes that it could be over 100,000 because we guarantee their families the special immigrant visa as well as the individuals who earned it, because of course the families' lives are at risk also. Those are still there. This is a trickle that we are getting out. And again, this is a real failure on our part. And I think that a number of other countries have done the same, sadly. That doesn't count at all the hundreds of thousands of other individuals who incurred risk by just serving in the Afghan government, working to achieve our mutual goals and objectives, and of course, members of their families. And I'm sure that all of the veterans there, just as I do, receive numerous emails and messages through various means on a daily basis from those who have been left behind. I support No One Left Behind, which is a nonprofit in the US, which has enormous legal expertise, considerable financial resources, and so forth to help those get here and then get their feet on the ground once they are here. We just haven't been able to get enough out, actually, to really do what we need to do in that regard. And so, again, we have not met that obligation. To be fair, the president of Afghanistan did not want to alarm people, not unlike, by the way, President Zelensky, who right up until the invasion started, didn't want certain actions taken either for fear of alarming the public. But that obviously was a big miscalculation as well.
So many miscalculations that have had so many consequences. General David Petraeus, I'm conscious that you have to go, so I just want one final question to you, if I may, a closing thought. If you look at Afghanistan now and the rapid decline since that final evacuation, we're looking at a country in economic crisis in the midst of a famine. 95% of the population in Afghanistan going hungry in some respect. Is there any future for the West in Afghanistan? Can they ever work with the Taliban? What is the future for Afghanistan? Because this is a country that has gone back to the dark ages since the West have withdrawn.
Well, I think you've characterized that very well, Sarah Jane. It is the Dark Ages. It's an 8th or 9th century interpretation of Islam that is beyond ultra-conservative. Now, women, of course, even have to cover even their faces. They're very restricted in what they can do outside the home, in the economy, and so forth. So 50% of the population is severely restricted. Girls can't go to high school, much less to college, as they used to be able to do. All of this, not to mention a variety of other of the governmental policies that are not going to bring the economy back, needless to say. It has collapsed. And I see no prospect of anyone from the outside being willing to invest much. In fact, the biggest elements of the economy now, tragically, are those that surround illegal narcotics. There's a big meth problem there now, in addition to, of course, the problem they've always had with poppy and opium-related illegal narcotics. So it is an absolutely tragic situation. I do know that diplomats and others, the policymakers here, are seriously and truly concerned about that, trying to figure out how to provide assistance to those who are most in need through non-governmental organizations that could avoid strengthening the Taliban and the regime and so forth, and rewarding them for their very, very, again, ultra-conservative actions. But it is an absolute tragedy again, and this is why, as I said, the outcome there has been heartbreaking, it has been tragic, and I believe it has been disastrous.
General David Petraeus, we thank you so much for your time here on Sky News. So good to get your insight and your reaction to that report on the UK's withdrawal published today. Thank you.
Thank you.